Hello and welcome to Just Roll With It, a board game channel where we discuss and play various games. My name's Jordan, and today we're going to be taking a look at my top 12 favorite games, lighter games, that I like to take to maybe less experienced gamers' houses, maybe people who are new to the hobby. This list will not include any games that are specifically for two players. I try to keep it like 4 players and above, because generally speaking, when you go to people's houses, there's going to be a few people. These aren't expressly party games either, so these aren't all games with super high player counts. Some of them are just 4, up to I think like 8-ish for a couple of the games. But yeah, it's basically, the list is in no particular order, so this isn't like, the 10th one is the worst and the 12th one is the worst and the first one is the best or anything like that. The list is in no particular order. These are just games that I really like to take when I visit, people who don't play a lot of games or maybe who aren't familiar with a lot of board games, as pretty good introductions that are fun for both experienced players and new players alike. So, without further ado, let's start with number 1. The first game here, this is a wonderful little flip and write game, Silver and Gold, where you're essentially going to be marking off X's on a map. So, there's going to be these cards that are going to flip over. It's a deck of, I believe, like 7 cards. 8 cards. And you're going to be drawing 7 of these in a round, so there's always going to be one randomly that isn't picked, and they have different shapes on them. And you're going to have these treasure map cards, and you're going to be using your markers to mark off that shape on the card, with the goal being to mark off all the spaces on each card. And once you mark it off, you score points. So you're basically just writing X's to score points. It's a super quick game. It's really easy to teach people, and I find a lot of like newer gamers and experienced gamers really enjoy like writing on cards. That's not something that you typically do a lot. So yeah, like I said, these are in no particular order, so it's any order you like. Next up, we have Hanabi. This is a game which has a really fun gimmick. This is cooperative, where you're all going to have a hand of cards that looks like this. So there are going to be different colors. There's yellow, green, blue, red, white. I think I got them all. And they'll have different numbers 1 through 5. Your goal and the gimmick of the game is that you are cooperating to make the best fireworks display. That's the theme. You're going to do that by basically giving other players hints, because no one can see their own cards. So when you have your hand of cards, they're all going to be facing away from you just like this. So you're going to start with basically 0 information about what you have in your hand, and your goal is to get players, through giving them clues, to play their cards in ascending numerical order from 1 to 5 of a given color. So you basically want to make sure you're laying the 1 down first, followed by the 2 of green, 3 of green, 4 green, 5 green, etc. And you're going to be doing that for the different colors. And the goal is just to get as high of a score as you can, and your score is just the highest number in each color. So if you have, green 1 through 5, that's 5 points for that one. If you have yellow and it's only on, you have a 1 and a 2, that's 2 points. And so when you're done, you just total up your points. It's a really fun game to teach people, super easy, and it's really difficult, which makes it a lot of fun. And a lot of people are not used to the idea that you can't see your own cards. There's also not a lot of cooperative card games, which I think sets this one aside, or like lighter card games that you can just play with really simple cards. So I think that's pretty cool as well. Our next game is going to be Splendor. This game is phenomenal. It's one of my favorite games to break out, especially with people who aren't super familiar with games, because It's super simple, but there's enough depth and decision making to make it interesting every single time, and it's really quick. I think it takes probably like 30 minutes, something like that. Probably like even just like 45 minutes with the teach, which is also fantastic. But basically, you're going to have all these little gems that are like poker chips in different colors, or 3 different colors. And then there's going to be this whole arrangement of cards, which basically have a cost on them, so different colors of gems. So like maybe you need 2 black gems and a red gem to buy that one. And then on your turn, like I said, you can either take 2 gems of the same color, 3 different colored gems, or you can buy a card. And when you buy the card, it goes face up in front of you. And some of them have not only victory points, which you're trying to get to a certain number of victory points to trigger the end of the game, but they also will sometimes have a gem, one of the different colors of gems pictured on them. So you can buy a card, and now that counts basically as always having a gem token of that color. And so it's a really fun economy game. I forget what the score goes to. I think it's like 15 points, something like that. So once someone has a total of 15 points in front of them through their cards that they've bought, that triggers the end of the game. And technically, if 2 people are close, like they can break the tie. But super quick, super fun, really easy to learn and teach, because you're basically just, what you do on your turn is very simple. You're basically choosing which gems to take in order to buy some cards, and those cards give you victory points and basically free gems. They count as the tokens for the gems. And it's always fun and always super easy to teach. Next one we've got here is Letter Jam. This is a cooperative game in which you are all going to be, you're going to start the game, everyone's going to get a handful of letters. Letters in the alphabet. And you're going to basically spell a 5-letter word. Once you spell your 5-letter word, you're going to shuffle those cards up and you're going to pass them to your left. So everyone basically doesn't know what word they have, and the word that they have was the person sitting next to them, and it's scrambled. And it's all face down. They don't know what word it is. Then what you are going to do is, when you play the game, everyone is going to flip up the first letter, from that random assortment of 5 letters that they got, so it's facing away from them. So similar to Hanabi, this also has the mechanic of you can't see your own cards. So you flip the first letter up, everyone has the first letter up, and then you're going to cooperatively all try to come up with words that include the letters in front of all players. So obviously you can't see your own, but you can see all the other players' letters, and you're trying to make a word out of it, and you say, like, you can't be specific, but you can say, like, I can make a word that can fit 4 people's letters, right? Because you're trying to fit as many as possible, because you're trying to give people clues. You can't say whose letter it is. Obviously, I have a letter that uses Johnny's, or a word that uses Johnny's letter. That doesn't make any sense. That would be way too easy. So you need to be kind of nebulous about it. And they say, okay, well, you have the most letters and you can help the most people, so why don't you go? And so you take one of the clue tokens. You can only give a certain number of clues in the game, and you spell it with numbered tokens. So you have 1 through like 9, I think it is. And you place those in front of the letters that it uses. There will also be generic letters in the middle that are obviously no player's letters, but they help you spell words, a lot of vowels and things. So you're going to place those tokens out in the number that so like if the clue was water, you can't say it obviously, because then everyone would know what it is. You would place the number 1 token in front of the W, the number 2 token in front of the A, etc., till you've spelled the word. And then everyone basically writes down what they can see. So they can't see their own, but they can see everybody else's. So if my letter is an A, I'd write W blank, because I don't know what's in front of me, TER, and then I would basically try to figure out what letters could fit where the blanks are. And ultimately what word I can spell with the blank. Once I think I know what I've got, I go ahead and flip down my card, and I flip up on my next one. And the goal of the game is basically just get everybody through their words. That's how you're going to score the most points. It's really fun at the end of the game. Basically, you have to take all your guesses, rearrange the letters, and then flip them up and reveal them like one at a time and see how wrong you are. And there's so many times where people will be completely certain they know what they have or completely think that they have no idea what they have. And, it's a surprise every time what you've got. It's always fun. It's less about the winning and getting a high score and more about just like the teamwork and trying to see how well you can do with what you're given. It's always a blast. Super simple. It is a little bit more difficult of a teach. But usually if you just take some people through like a round or two with just like dummy cards, it helps solidify it. But it's one of those things when you're describing it to people, they kind of get a little confused because of, you trying to make a clue that's a word, but you can't say the word. All right, we have number 5 here, which is Codenames. Lots of people know Codenames. It's a pretty popular game, even amongst people who aren't really in the hobby. I mean, you can buy it at Target, but it's a fantastic game. This is a team-based, more party game. This is probably the most party game other than Letter Jam. Even Letter Jam, I think, only goes to 6 players. Either way, I recommend you don't go over like 8 players, which is 4 to a team, but you can technically go to as many as you have or want. But each team is going to have a dedicated spy master who is going to be the person who has the clue card and will know where all their operatives are in the field. So you'll have a red spy master and a blue spy master, and they will get a card that looks something like this. I'm not sure that that's really going to show up very well, but it has a whole bunch of blue and red squares, as well as a black square and some beige squares. So each spy master, the spy master on each team, is going to know where everything on the board is, and then you're going to have a 5x5 grid of words, cards with words on them. And your goal is to give clues to your team, if you're on red team, or you're giving clues to the red team. If you're on the blue team, you're giving clues to the blue team. And your clue has to be a word, and then how many things it relates to. So it'll be a word that isn't on the board, and then how many of your operatives that word can relate to. So if I give a clue and it relates to 2 of our red squares, and I'm on the red team, I would say whatever the word is, 2, indicating to my team that, hey, this clue applies to 2 things. So if you had something like capital and state were on the board, and they were both red squares on the Spy Master's card, I could give the clue like Washington 2, or something like that, in order to get my team to basically guess them. If you guess the enemy team's one of their squares, that's going to give the enemy team basically a point, and you're basically just competing to get to have all of your operatives located before the other team can. The really fun wrinkle is that there is the black X space, which is the assassin, and if either team picks the assassin, that team immediately loses, which is pretty fun because it keeps people from just like shotgunning guesses, because you have to be very careful as a spy master when you give your guests not to... Alright, that was number 5. This is number 6, Cryptid. I feel like this game doesn't get enough buzz. It is a phenomenal game. It is one of my favorite abstract games that I've played. It plays really quickly. It's really fun to watch people learn and understand the mechanics. This one's going to be pretty light. Essentially what's going to happen is you're going to have a board, which is a bunch of different colored hexagons, and they have art on them, but again, it's pretty abstract, so it's more or less just colors, but the different colors represent different environments. So you'll have like purple is swamp, gray is mountains, yellow is sand, etc. And you'll also get these little wooden pieces that are structures and tents, and they will also be placed around the board. So you'll draw a card, and that'll tell you where everything needs to be placed. and what clues everybody gets. So then everybody gets their clue book. They look at the number on the card, and that will say some piece of information about where the cryptid is. Again, it's very abstract, but the goal of the game is essentially on this giant grid of hexes to locate the exact space, and only one space, where the cryptid can be based on all the players' clues. So they're based on, if you have a 4-player game, there will be 4 clues that have been given, 1 to each player, and only that player knows it, and you're essentially trying to deduce what everyone else's clues are. So you know your own, but you're trying to deduce what everyone else's are. And once you think you've figured it out, you basically, one of your actions is to say, I think it's here, and then you go clockwise around, and you ask each person, could it not? They say no, and they put a cube down, and you keep playing. It's a really fun deduction game. It works really well. The only thing I would say is you may want to do like a practice game for this one as well, because although what you do on your turn is very simple, like there's basically 2 things you can do on your turn. It's either ask someone where something could be, and they either say yes or no with a cube or a little puck, or you say, I think it's here, you place your yes, your puck down, and then, like I said, you go around. The only thing is, because there's not a solution, written on a card somewhere, that says, this is the space, what can happen is if people don't understand what their clues mean, if someone screws up their clue, no one's going to be able to win the game, because the solution relies entirely on all of the players adhering to their clue exactly and never accidentally messing it up. If you do, you're not going to have a solution. That's the only downside of this game. But usually if you play around with somebody, with a group, and you just say, hey, this is how it works, and make sure that they ask any questions, and make sure it's very clear that if they screw up their clue, it's going to be basically impossible for anybody to win, and the game just kind of goes on forever. But this is a phenomenal game. I feel like it doesn't get enough talk. If this list was ranked, I think this one would be pretty high, because I don't know, it's always fun. Alright, so our 7th game today is going to be Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. And if you've ever played One Night Ultimate Werewolf, this is very similar to that, but it is definitely different, but it plays very similarly. It's a nice quick game where you're trying to deduce who the killer is. So one player is going to be the killer. You're going to have I believe they're called the forensic investigator, is going to be basically the admin player who's managing everything else. They're going to know who the murderer is, and they're going to know the means and clue in front of the murderer by the 2 cards, a means card, which are these blue ones, and they're going to be like sniper, crowbar, how the person was murdered, dumbbell. And then they also need to identify the clue. So you'll have, a piece of evidence that was left at the scene. So spring, playing cards, walk, dice. There's a ton of these cards. You have a ton of variety. So no need to ever worry about basically forgetting the same card twice. So in front of each player is going to be 4 of each. And the investigators are going to have a very small amount of information, which is they're going to have the cause of death. So this is something that the admin of the game, the forensic investigator, is going to have. They'll always have the cause of death, and then they'll have random, I believe it is 5 more, I could be wrong about that, clues. And these are going to be other things that the forensic investigator can use to help indicate to the other investigators who the murderer is. So they can't overtly tell them, but they're going to be placing, there's these cool little bullet tokens on each of these little clues to help indicate whom the murderer is. So social relationship, relatives, friends, colleagues. So you basically place the bullet wherever you feel is most appropriate based on the means and clue card that the other players have. And the game, I believe, is only 3 rounds, which keeps it really nice and short. And after 3 rounds, if the investigators have not found the murderer wins. But if the investigators have accurately identified the clue they're the means and the clue card in front of the murderer, then they win. Super nice, super quick. The other nice thing is that each investigator only gets one guess, so they can only make one accusation. So some of these social deduction games, you can get into a situation where people will just sort of like vote random people out. You don't really want to do that. No one's kicked out, which is really nice. That is one thing that this game fixes for me over One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I really hate in games when you can get eliminated, especially if it's right away in the beginning and then you just have to kind of watch everybody else play. You don't have that. The only way you really get eliminated is that you just can't make any accusations anymore. So you can still discuss with other players and you can still help and participate in the game, but you can no longer point at someone's cards and say, this card and this card, is that the murderer? Which I think is a pretty good way to do it. It avoids people just getting randomly voted out and not being able to participate in the game, but it also means you can't just spam accusations. Really fun. And like I said, there's a ton of cards in this box, and you will basically never see the same combination twice. Like, the chances of that happening are very low. So, it's our number 8. Now for our real number 8, we have Valley of the Kings. And if you've ever played Dominion, this is very similar to that. It is a deck building game where every player is going to start with a small hand of cards that are all the same. And then there's going to be a pyramid of cards in front of all the players that they can essentially buy from. So just like Dominion, on your turn, you're going to have your hand of cards, and you're going to be able to buy new cards and play cards for their abilities, right? Exactly the same. The gimmick here is twofold. So not only do you have the pyramid, which is your like tableau of cards that you have in Dominion. So in Dominion, all the cards you're playing with start out in the field, but in Valley of the Kings, it's going to be in a pyramid shape, and every time you take a card, you can only take from the bottom of the pyramid. And when you take that card, the pyramid is going to essentially crumble and fill in that space, making new cards available, which is really cool. It's really simple, but it works really, really well, and it makes it much more interesting because it makes it so that you're a little bit more careful about what you buy, because you may be inadvertently crumbling something else down that now your opponent can buy on their turn if they really want it. And the second thing that makes this game really cool is how you score points. So in something like Dominion, typically you're going to be having cards that fill up your hand and prevent you from playing them, but they're worth victory points at the end game. This game does not have this. Every single card is worth victory points. However, they're not worth any victory points while they're in your hand or deck. They're only worth victory points if you entomb them. You can do one entomb on your turn by default, but some cards' special abilities will let you do more, but generally you're going to be able to entomb exactly one card. The cool scoring at the end is that each card set that you play with is going to have a color, so you'll have like a blue set, a green set, a yellow set, etc. And you can mix and match. There's a whole bunch of sets in here. You are going to get I believe it's the number of that color squared. So if you have 3 blue cards, it would be 3 times 3. So it would be worth 9 points. It's really fun. I like that. Also, you can only ever have one of each copy entombed. Or, well, you can entomb more than one copy of a card, but for scoring purposes, you can only score one of each card in a set. So each card has to be unique in the set that you're scoring. You can't, get 4 of the cheapest ones and score a bunch of points for them. It has to be unique cards. But yeah, really, really fun game. Also plays really quick, easy to teach. The abilities are really simple. This is the premium edition, which I really like. This uses tarot-sized cards, so they're a bit bigger. And it comes with sleeves. I do like the art style update, so this is essentially like the 2.0 version of this game. There's an older version that's much smaller on standard size cards. The art's not quite as good in my opinion, but it is a nice travel edition. I believe you can still buy it. I don't think it's out of print, but this is like the new version, and everything fits really nicely in this box. And like I said, it comes with sleeves and everything. But yeah, this is a phenomenal game. Highly recommend. All right. So number 9 here is one that a lot of people are going to have played or at least be familiar with. This game has been around for a long time, and that is Pandemic. It's a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players where you are going to be basically moving around a map which has a bunch of different connections to different cities, and you're going to be trying to cure and eradicate disease. Disease is going to be represented by these little cubes. And your goal is basically, there's 4 different colors of cubes, which are supposed to represent viruses. So you have black, red, yellow, and blue in the base game. And you're basically going to have different cards in your hand that are different cities, and each person is going to take on a different role that's going to have a different ability. And you're basically trying to race against the clock to research cures for all 4 diseases, and if you can do that, you beat the game. It's very solid co-op game. Doesn't take a lot of time. It has really good reference cards for people to know, how traveling to the different cities works, because you can basically use your city cards that you have either to help you cure the disease or as transportation, so you can take like a connected flight or a direct flight to different locations. But plays super quick. It's really good for introductory, cooperative games. And because it's cooperative, it's a little bit easier to teach people and play. This particular entry, I went with Pandemic, but it could have easily been Horrified, which is also a great game and plays very similarly, and Atlantis Rising, which is a little bit different. There's some die rolling in that one, but the same core gameplay, cooperative stuff is all very similar. So either of those other 2 games, Horrified or Atlantis Rising, strike your fancy more in terms of the theme or the look of the game, by all means get those. But this is a fantastic cooperative game, and it's probably just always going to be a classic. Okay, so for our number 10, we have Unmatched. This is the Cobble and Fog box, but there's tons of different Unmatched. And this is going to be basically a game where you are each going to be controlling a different character. These characters, so specifically in Cobble and Fog, you have Jekyll and Hyde, Sherlock Holmes, the Invisible Man, and Dracula, but the different boxes have all kinds of different ones that you can play as, so basically pick up any one that has characters that you're interested in. It's 2 to 4 players, or I should say 2 or 4 players, basically. So if you do 4 players, you'll be 2 players to a team, so 2 teams of 2. But it works pretty well, and super simple deck game. So you're going to have your miniature out on the board, and you're going to have your pre-built deck of, I believe, around 30 cards, I think, something like that. So not a huge deck that each character is going to have, and each character's deck is going to be heavily tailored to that character. So all of their special abilities and things are going to be things that thematically make sense to that character. So for instance, Sherlock Holmes has a lot of cards that are based around deduction. And so some of his cards will let him, basically if he can guess a card that's in a player's hand, guess the value of it, I think, he gets to discard it, things like that. And so the core gameplay loop is really simple. You get to do 2 actions on your turn. Those actions are things like you can maneuver, and maneuvering is the only way you're going to be able to draw cards. So you can maneuver, which allows you to draw one of the cards from your deck, and you have to do it. You cannot optionally not draw the card. And then you may optionally move as a part of that maneuver. You can attack. Pretty simple. If you attack someone, you play a card that you want to attack them with face down. It's either a purple or a red card, and then they can use a blue defense card to block it if they would like to, and then the difference between those 2 is the damage that's dealt. And then you can also, they're called scheme cards, which do various other effects, like the Sherlock Holmes one I was talking about would be a scheme card. And that's it. Super simple. It's a pretty light game. But I will say that there's a decent amount of depth. It's very important to make sure you always have, defense cards in your hand. And if you run out of cards, it's a bad thing. So you have to be careful how much you're moving, and you have to be careful, where you're moving to and things like that. Because a lot of the characters will have sidekicks that also get to move around. They usually have a lot less health. Like Dracula has the brides, or the sisters rather. They each have 1 health, but they're able to do cards that are in your deck specifically for them. Super simple. The really nice thing about this is a whole game. I think you can get it for like $30, and this allows you to play up to 4. Play with 4 players, but it's a really fun game. It's based on the Star Wars Epic Duels game, which is from quite a while ago. But it's basically that's what Restoration Games does, is takes old games that are either out of print and puts a new coat of paint on them and updates the rules, and yeah, that's Unmatched. Really fun. You could substitute this with something like Dice Throne if that's more your speed. I think Dice Throne, it's good, but that's going to be a lot more dice rolling. This doesn't really have that. This is just your deck, and you're playing cards against each other to see who's the last one standing. But yeah, that's Unmatched. All right, on to our number 11, which is going to be Mysterium. This is a really great party game. It is cooperative, and can go up to 7 players. And essentially what's going to happen is it's sort of like really good Clue, if Clue was cooperative and fun. So one player is going to be the ghost, and the other players are going to be the seances that are basically trying to determine who killed the ghost. So the ghost is trying to silently, the ghost cannot speak, direct the players towards which cards they need to pick up. So there's going to be a weapon, a location, and a person, and there's going to be 3 levels of those. And each one of those is going to correspond to one of the players. So each player is trying to get a full set of 3. So there will be, I don't remember the exact order, but once you find your character, the one that coordinates to you, you'll take your character and you'll set it aside. Then you'll move on to the locations. Once you find your location, you'll move on to weapons. That might be the order. I don't remember. Point is, the way that the ghost is going to try to indicate to you which card each is your card is they're going to give you what are called vision cards. And if you've ever played something like Dixit, this uses that same system, where they're basically really cool cards that are full art, and they show abstract art. And that art is indicating in some way, according to the ghost, what card you should be looking at and pointing at. And the ghost will just keep giving you cards. If it takes you, if you guess and you're wrong, the ghost will give you some more cards to try to help you out. And the goal is basically to get everyone their set of 3 cards, so their location, their character, and their weapon. Once everybody has their 3 cards, then the ghost is going to choose one of those sets of 3 cards to be the actual murderer, and the characters are going to vote on which one it is, and if they get it correct, then they win the game. Everyone wins the game. There's a little bit more to it than that. There's a whole system of like the ghost gets to give clues at the end to which group of 3 is the murderer, but we don't need to go into all that. Really fun deduction game. It's cooperative, which again always helps with the teach, always helps with making sure people are understanding it and able to enjoy it. Because sometimes with competitive game, it's harder for people to enjoy it if they feel like they're not understanding it or doing really, really poorly the first time they play it. So highly, highly, highly recommend Mysterium. It's a great game. All right. And finally, for our number 12, it's basically 2 games. So similar to what I did with Pandemic, I'm going to recommend 2 different games that I think they're very similar. I am happy owning both of them, but they are very similar games as far as how they play. So we have Sentinels of the Multiverse, and we have Aeon's End, and I will talk about each of them and their differences. Sentinels of the Multiverse, you're going to be playing as superheroes who are fighting a villain cooperatively, and the goal is to defeat the villain. Very simple. And in Aeon's End, you're going to be mages who are the last remnants of society in a city called Gravehold, trying to prevent some sort of boss monster from destroying the city. So obviously, it sounds very similar. So I'm cheating a little bit with including these as my number 12. But the difference in these games is going to be that in Aeon's End, it's going to be a little bit similar, more similar to something like Dominion, where you have the cards that can be purchased are out on the table, and everyone starts with a very basic deck of cards, and is then basically going to get currency, which in this game is gems, to buy those better cards and put those into their deck. The other really cool gimmick with this game is that instead of shuffling your deck when you run out of cards, you actually just take it in the order that it is and flip it over. So you can kind of determine the order because at the end of your turn, you are able to choose the order you discard your cards in, so that when you do flip that deck over, you can put, certain... Yeah, I was super happy with it. And then Sentinels here. Like I said, super similar. The gimmick with this one is you're not deck building. So this one has some deck building in it. This one does not have any deck building. Your hero's deck is fully constructed, and you're basically just playing that hero in an effort to beat the big bad. I've never played the original version of this game. There's an older version of Sentinels of the Multiverse that doesn't quite look as nice, and from what I understand, has a little bit more... The rules are a little bit more difficult to follow, a little bit more upkeep. But this one does it pretty well. Everything's nice and color-coded and bolded on the cards, so you know when things trigger. But you're going to be taking control of a hero, and basically each hero plays pretty differently. I've never played one that played the same as another one. So that's a really nice thing, because even though they're the pre-constructed decks, you're basically learning, the game is learning how to play that character well and beat the villain. There's also a ton of content in this game. Aeon's End has quite a bit too, but I think I would recommend you get at least a few of the small expansions to kind of bolster out the cards that you can play with, that go out on the board to build your deck with. This one comes with 12 heroes. I was going to say 12. 12 heroes, 6 villains, 6 environments, which is great. There's a lot of variety in here. I don't think I've played all 12 yet. I'm getting close, but there's a ton of variety, mixing and matching. You can make the game more difficult if you want to, things like that. But both are fantastic games, but if you're really only wanting to get one, choose, do you like superheroes or do you like mages? Do you like not deck building, or do you like deck building? Those are the big differences. But I put them as my number 12 just because I felt like if you don't own either, you probably only need one. So that is the list. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, if you're looking to get people into the hobby, or going to a game night where people maybe don't have a ton of experience with board games, hopefully some of those can help you out, and maybe you haven't heard of some of them, and you can check them out and see if those are something you'd be interested in. But yeah, that is the list. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave suggestions for other videos to do in the comments. I'm always open to hearing what people have to say, especially if you want us to cover something specific. Till next time, have a great rest of your week.